Thank you all for being here. Howard Glazer, State Director of Operations, who's been running the emergency operation. We'll have some opening comments. Mr. Glazer.
We're joined this afternoon by Ben Lawsky, who is the Superintendent for the Department of Financial Services, and Darrell Towns, the Commissioner of Homes and Community Renewal. Today, we are watching very carefully the storm disturbance that's coming up the coast. It looks to be a significant coastal storm. This afternoon, we spoke with the National Weather Service, got a detailed briefing on this, and their confidence is increasing that we will have a storm that creates several problems for New York and the region. First is that cold rain will be ahead of this storm, ahead of the wind part of this storm, in already difficult conditions on the ground. So trees that have already been damaged are more likely to be falling in wet soil. This is going to have an impact on recovery, the overall storm will, and an impact on trees and additional power outages. We're looking at winds with potential gusts 50, 60 miles an hour that will have a power impact as well, an additional storm surge of 2 to 4 feet, which could cause some modest coastal flooding. The problem, of course, is beaches are already eroded. In some places, dunes are down. You already have communities that have been damaged by the coastal storms. We have new inlets created, so it's a little uncertain as to what the impact is, even if the storm surge is not 12 feet or 14 feet, 2 feet or 4 feet is hitting a different coast. So we're looking at all those things, working with our Department of Environmental Conservation and Parks and other agencies on that. The governor, in anticipation of the storm, has some additional announcements to talk about today in terms of fuel, transportation, and power.
Thank you. We're also joined by Secretary to the Governor Larry Schwartz, who is to my right, and Benjamin Lawsky, the Superintendent of the Department of Financial Services, to my left. First, the progress continues to go well. We're making progress, and we have been making progress every day since the storm. It's been steady progress. That is not to say we don't have significant problems that still exist, because we do. The power outages in Westchester and Nassau counties are truly terrible. We have pockets of issues in the outer boroughs, Staten Island, parts of Queens, the Rockaways, that pose great challenges still. So progress has been steady, but we have a lot more to do, and we still have people in peril. And then you heard the upcoming weather report from Howard Glazer. When it rains, it pours. When it storms, you get more storms, I guess. So we're now preparing for a potential storm on Wednesday, and we are deploying accordingly. The storm that they forecast is a serious storm, but under normal conditions, it wouldn't be that problematic. This is complicated because it is a storm that would approach before we've recovered from the first storm. And it would hit communities, some of which may not have power, some of which already have flooding. So it complicates the situation. One of the complications is that there is much debris that is on the street and in front of people's homes. You've seen the pictures if you haven't been in the communities yourself, but homes were flooded. What many people did was they removed the household contents and then they put it in front of the house, normally on the front lawn. Often the entire contents of a home, furniture, clothes, bedding, food material, in front of the house. Why do they leave it in front of the house? Because many insurance companies require proof of loss before they'll pay a claim. And people were told by their insurance companies, if you dispose of the items, then they won't be covered under the insurance. The state regulates the insurance industry. Today, the state has issued a directive to the insurance companies that they will accept as proof of loss an inventory done by the homeowner and photographs of the items. So what we're asking individuals this evening is make a list of the items that you believe are covered by the insurance, take a photograph of the item, keep the list, keep the photograph, and get rid of the rest of the material. Put it to the end of the street where it can be picked up. Second, we're asking the local governments to assist us in this task. We believe this is a public health emergency. I'm signing an executive order that directs the local governments to pick up the debris, pick it up quickly, pick it up before the storm comes on Wednesday. Any additional pickup costs will be paid by the federal government. We've spoken with them about this task. They'll be reimbursed by FEMA. But the goal is to get the debris picked up before the storm hits Wednesday. We don't want the amount of debris that is now on the streets and in yards to be caught up in this storm. So between the directive to the insurance companies, authorizing them to accept photographs and lists, and the local governments assisting in the cleanup of the debris, we think that that will make a significant difference. In terms of power restoration, approximately 480,000 New Yorkers are still without power. That is down from 2.1 million at the height. So again, we've made progress, but the progress is unacceptable. To say that I am angry, to say that I am frustrated, disappointed would be the understatement of the decade. I think the utility companies have not performed adequately. I have let them know that. I've let them know that repeatedly. I've let them know that in no uncertain terms. I will continue to let them know that. And I promise the people of this state that they will be held accountable for their lack of performance. The utilities are paid to provide a service. And I believe in this case, they haven't adequately provided that service. Yes, it was a storm. Yes, it was a catastrophic storm. But they should have been prepared. They should have been responsive. They should have been communicative. People should be getting information. It's one thing if you can't get the power back on. It's another thing if you're not even communicating with people so they can plan their lives. When is the power coming on? When can the child go back to school, et cetera? But they will be held accountable. On the fuel situation, as we noted before, the storm damaged the fuel delivery system. Terminals were damaged. Tankers couldn't get into the harbor because the harbor had material in the harbor, and the Coast Guard closed the harbor for a period of time. The entire fuel delivery system chain, if you will, had damage at various points. Much of that has been corrected. It is continuing to be corrected. We brought in additional tankers, but we have a complication now, which is people are now panicked. There's anxiety, so they're now hoarding gasoline. We're actually purchasing more gasoline than normal usage would project. And that's human nature. People see the lines, they're nervous, they think if they don't act, they're not going to get it. So they are now actually compounding the situation and making it worse. One of the things we're working on is getting gasoline from other states shipped into this state. Normally, the service delivery system on fuel is regulated state by state. We're asking other states to allow shipments into our state, and we're asking other states to allow our trucks, our tankers, to go to their states to pick up fuel to bring it back to New York. I've spoken to the governor of Massachusetts, Governor DeVal Patrick, Governor of Connecticut, Governor Malloy, Governor Markell of Delaware. They've agreed to waive all their restrictions in their state, all their taxation policies, registration policies, and allow basically a transfer of fuel. We believe that's going to help. I spoke with President Obama this afternoon on a call and asked him to facilitate the other states agreeing to allow cross-transfer of fuel, and the President said he would do that. So I think that holds serious potential to bring more fuel into the state right away. It's a situation that we are monitoring daily, but it is a situation that is going to require patience. The hoarding is only going to compound the situation and make it worse. Tomorrow is Election Day, as we know. There are complications on Election Day because you have people who are displaced, you have people who are in shelters, you have people who are staying at friends' house, people who are staying at family's house, and it's often a far distance from their residence and a far distance from their original polling place. We want everyone to vote. Just because you're displaced doesn't mean you should be disenfranchised. I'm signing an executive order today that will allow affidavit voting, where you can go to any polling place. If you're displaced, go to any polling place, sign an affidavit, and you can vote in that polling place. Normally, you have to vote in the polling place that is assigned to you. In this situation, you can vote in any proximate polling place. They'll ask you to sign an affidavit and vote by affidavit, and your vote will count at that polling place, and I'm signing an executive order to that effect today. Lastly, I just once again want to thank New Yorkers. I want to thank New Yorkers for their patience. I want to thank New Yorkers for the way they have come together and their spirit of community. And on behalf of all New Yorkers, we want to thank all the volunteers who have come into our state. I've run into people from the West, from the South. It's amazing, the outpouring of support that people are showing for New York. And I can't tell you how many people I met who just got in a car and drove and came here because they wanted to help any way they could. People bring meals, people are bringing food, they're bringing clothing, they're coming to work. It really is heartwarming to see the support for our state and the people of our state. And maybe we don't have heat on in all our homes, but the warmth that these people have brought to New York has made a real difference. And we want to thank them all. And we will not forget it. We will not forget it. Questions? Sorry, go ahead, sir.
Regarding the voting, I just want to clarify how exactly is this going to work, because you got ballots from all different assembly districts, state senate districts. You print them from a logistical standpoint. How is this going to work?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is how it will work. Let's say you are displaced and you are living 5 miles away from your original home. You go into that polling place, you file an affidavit, sign an affidavit, and you vote, and you fill out the ballot. You're filling out the ballot in that polling place, which is for that district, obviously. Much of the ballot this year is the same no matter what polling place you live in. President of the United States is the same. Senate is the same. Depending on what polling place you go into, your vote will count for those races for which your vote is eligible in the first place. In other words, everyone's vote counts for president, because whatever district you live in, you vote for president. Statewide office, U.S. Senate, your vote counts wherever you vote. Local races, if you vote in a different assembly district, your vote will not count for that assembly district. If you vote in a different Senate district, your vote will not count for that Senate district. So it's within the districts for which you are eligible.
This is a good follow-up. Can you write in the name if you want to, for example,
No?
vote for?
You fill out that ballot, and that is the downside to the system, actually. If you go to a different polling place outside of your district, you can't vote for what we call the down ballot, district-specific individuals in that ballot. Your vote will not be eligible for votes for which, in races for which your vote was not eligible in the first place.
That's true of federal absentee ballots that get sent overseas also, isn't it in some cases?
I believe it is. I believe it is, Dan, but it's outside of my expertise.
It's not unheard of in that sense.
No. And it's fair. You know, you can't vote for a race that you're not registered to vote for. Excuse me one second. Is that accurate?
Yes.
How are you going to maintain, is there going to be greater effort to ensure anonymity and put in place here? Is it gonna be just-
Yes, you fill out a ballot anonymously, but you file an affidavit.
It's placed in an envelope.
Ozzy?
Are you satisfied with how election officials have sort of communicated and made preparations to help people who are displaced and in terms of setting up the phone sites?
Look, it is a difficult situation. I understand it's difficult. The Board of Elections appears to be working very hard to do everything they can. But, you know, it's, as I often say, especially this past week, Ozzy, it is what it is. You have people who are displaced. We're trying to do the best we can. We want everyone to vote. We want to make it as easy as possible. This executive order that I'm signing today is an extraordinary step in that direction. But it's a difficult situation. You'll have some polling places that are closed. People will show up to the polling place that they always vote at, and they'll find out that it's closed, and they'll find another address, and then they're going to have to find another location. So it's not going to be easy. But I think of it this way. Compared to what we have had to deal with the past week, this will be a walk in the park going out and voting.
Gentlemen, are any provisions being made for people who are homeless, who've lost their homes, and also polling places are damaged or without power? Provisions being made to get them to a polling place?
You have a lot of groups that are doing outreach to try to get people to the polls and who are doing just that. You have volunteer efforts, good government groups that are doing it. But the best place for that question is the Board of Elections. Hi.
Housing, what is the detailed plan for finding a place to stay for the tens of thousands of people who damaged,
Well-
and what will be the cost?
Cost will be expensive. Luckily, we are going to apply to the federal government early and often for reimbursement for the cost. It's going to depend on the needs. First, we have very wide estimates of the size of the population we're talking about. High-end estimates have been 40,000 people. Low-end estimates have been 10,000 people. But we don't really know yet, in truth. These are just very rough estimates. Many of the people who are displaced will be from New York City's public housing stock. Early estimates are that the New York City public housing system, what they call NYCHA, will be able to house those people. That would be a very big deal. You'll have a lot of homeowners, especially on Long Island, Rockaways, Breezy Point, who are displaced. I believe many of them with private insurance will be able to repair the home or rebuild the home or replace the home. So we have to get the actual number. And then you're going to have some people who need short-term housing solutions and some people who will need long-term housing solutions. And those are two very different things. We have a significant short-term housing market, expensive, but we have an extensive short-term housing market, and we have long-term housing options also. It's something we have to work on together. New York City will have a team dedicated to it, Nassau County, Suffolk County. We already have a team dedicated to it. Commissioner Darrell Towns is with us. It is manageable. It is large, you're right, but it is manageable and it is expensive, and the federal government will defray the cost with us.
Specifically though, I mean, are we talking about, for example, FEMA trailers?
You know, the FEMA trailers really aren't used by FEMA that much anymore. Back in the day when I was at HUD, FEMA used the FEMA trailers. There are some local governments that will want trailers. Many communities on Long Island use trailers during situations like this, and they are frequently seen. So it's going to be a community-by-community option. Some communities will choose trailers. Some communities will use hotels, motels. Some communities will rent short-term apartments. So there'll be a host of options.
About these utilities, are you more upset with Con Ed or LIPA or both? And when you say that, they're going to have to be held accountable, what do you?
You know, Sally, we have to be careful. If you're in Manhattan, we're sitting in Manhattan today. Manhattan, you walk around Manhattan and it seems like the storm has passed and everything is just about fine. I mean, you have to look very carefully to find remnants of the storm. But this is the exception. This is not the rule. You go to Nassau County, and the devastation is everywhere, and the number of people without power still. Westchester County, the same thing. You go to the Rockaways, where I was last night. It's terrible. It is terrible. And, just because it's good in Manhattan doesn't mean, don't kid yourself, that's often not representative. I grew up in Queens. I'm a Queens boy. I know that orientation. There's a sense that the outer boroughs sometimes get forgotten and get passed over, and they're just not as visible. It is a problem. Staten Island, the Rockaways, Long Beach, you go right down the shore, Nassau, Suffolk. No, there's a lot of work done. So I am not happy with any of them. I'm not happy with any of them. You want to say Con Ed, you want to celebrate what Con Ed did in Manhattan. I want to complain of what Con Ed hasn't done in Westchester and hasn't done in the outer boroughs. I'm not happy with National Grid. I'm not happy with Orange and Rockland.
What kind of recourse do you have?
They're regulated by the Public Service Commission. These are the utilities, Ozzy, were not created in the Bible. They're not in the Old Testament. They're not in the New Testament. God never said, New York shall have these utilities forever, and Con Ed is the utility, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's really not in the Bible. Really, we made that decision as a people through a government. And what we say to the utilities are, we're going to give you, in essence, a franchise, a license, a charter to perform a service. But you have to perform a service. And it has to be fair, and it has to be professional, and you have to be reimbursed at a fair rate. And if you don't perform the service, basically, then don't ask the consumers to pay the bill. And if you can't provide the service, then we'll find another vendor who can. And that's done by the Public Service Commission. That is how that is the essence of this relationship, right? Con Edison will give you a contract to provide a service, and Ozzy will pay his bill monthly. It has to be a fair bill, but Ozzy will pay the bill monthly, and you provide the service to Ozzy. And if you don't, we regulate it, and if you don't, then we will find someone else to provide that service who can. And I believe handling one of these situations is part of the service. The service is not when the sun is shining and everything is perfect, do the lights work? Yes. When the sun is shining and everything is perfect, the lights work. That's not the service. The test of the service is, were you prepared for the storm? Did you have a backup plan? Did you have a plan to get out there? Did you have people out there 24 hours? Were you communicating with the consumers so they knew what was going on? Did you have an alternative plan to communicate with people so they knew how to get you? And if your plan was, well, they contact me on the web, if their power is out in the apartment, how are they going to contact you on the web? That's the plan? It's a phone company. They should call me if they have a problem. The phone is off. That's the problem.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you're planning to do about these backup plans that aren't working? I mean, can you take a little farther?
I understand the reality of the situation. I understand there was a storm. I understand it was catastrophic. And I am a reasonable person. And I want to give the utilities the opportunity to make their side of the case and explain their side of the case. And we will do this in a very fair, thorough process. But I believe the service was inadequate. We'll have the discussion, let them present their case, let it be a full, open, and transparent process. Let's have the discussion. Let's talk about past history. Let's talk about Hurricane Irene and what we could have or should have learned from Irene. And then the state will make a determination. The state's range of remedies goes from sanctions to revocation of franchise. Other utility companies can provide the same service, right? We can contract with other utility companies. These are not God-given monopolies.
Which companies?
I would review all of them. I would review all of them involved in this situation.
So are you saying you might give Con Ed to LIPA? Or LIPA to Rockland?
let's, before we,
How does that work?
before we get to who we bring in, let's make the decision that we want somebody out, right? But that is a process that we will take very seriously. Laura?
You've had to issue a number of executive orders waiving state regulations or asking the federal government to waive federal regulations temporarily in order to facilitate aid for people. Does that make you wonder about, is the state overregulated? Would you consider permanently suspending some of those regulations, or could you? Are there too many regulations for the easy transmission of aid to people who need it in times like this?
You know, Laura, what happens is, it's a good question. There's a balance. Many of the regulations are good ideas, and there's sort of, if you have the time, this would be good to do if you're doing this. This would be a good safeguard. This would be a good check. This would be a good caveat. This would be a good nuance if you had the time. What we're saying in this situation, the need is immediate, and you don't really have the time to go through a thorough process or a total process with all due diligence. So they are waivers for expediency's sake, literally. But in the normal course of business, would I recommend these waivers? No. We did the same thing during Hurricane Irene. You know, we waived many environmental regulations on rebuilding the streams and taking debris out of streams and et cetera. They were right for the moment, but they were not right long-term policy.
How long before gasoline actually starts hitting the pumps across the city?
It is starting to hit the pumps today. The question is at what point, really two questions. At what point does the volume go back to normal? No one can give us a good answer on that question because there are a lot of variables, one of which is, do you have any supplementary supply? And what we're working on today is a supplement to the normal supply line. Let's get trucks and tankers from outside our state to come in. That would be the first question. And the second question is, do people stop hoarding? Or does the hoarding get worse? Because that is a new intervening fact, which is a major problem for us.
How about limits on how much people can drop from the pumps?
An option that we consider, one of the options we consider every day is exactly that, a limit on how many gallons you can purchase. Another possibility is odd, even days. We've done that before in this state. So there are a number of options you can consider. We don't think we need, we haven't had to exercise any of them yet, but, you know, we'll see what happens.
One more, Ken.
I'm from Newsday, and to go back to gas again, we're getting reports from owners who have 40, 20 stations, that the gasoline is coming into the Port Jefferson terminal. It's then going through the pipeline to, I forget where it's going, but it's going through the pipeline to where it should go. And then they're sending, I guess, their trucks or tankers, whoever picks it up, and they're not getting cold spill. They're not getting gas cold spill. They're told it goes through to cold spill, and then when the trucks get there, they're told there's
Where does
gas.
it go? It's the great gas mystery. It goes
Yeah.
in the pipe on one end,
This
but
is
doesn't
my
come out the
editor's
other end.
question.
Sounds like an editor, doesn't it? Goes in one end of the pipe, it doesn't come out the other end.
I need an explanation. Do we know if gas is really
The only
going
explanation
to
is it's a very big pipe, tell the editor I said.
Do we know that the oil is going to Port Jefferson? Do we know that?
There are shipments going to Port Jefferson, we know that. And we know that there is gasoline coming out the other end of the pipe. Not that I want to disagree with your editor, because, yes.
You can do that. Can I tack one more question on? Can we go back to the Cuomo storm? Because there's a great concern on Long Island about the coast, the that's already been done? What's gonna happen to people there? Will more lives be lost? Can you address Long Island specifically on the coming storm?
We had a briefing, the president actually asked for a briefing on the weather that we heard. The storm is a serious storm that is projected, and we are taking it seriously. Normally, would I consider it a life-threatening storm? No. But these are not normal situations. You have communities which are in the midst of various stages of disrepair. You have homes that are open. You have homes that are tattered. You have homes with one wall hanging off that will now be wind battered again. You have all sorts of debris in the streets, which is what we are trying to act on today. And these are all possible projectiles. You have a 60-mile-an-hour wind with a street filled with all sorts of personal belongings and glass and fixtures. You could have a lot of dangerous material flying around. The ground is already saturated. Some storm systems are out. Many beachheads are out. So the storm on any other given day, I don't think would have been life-threatening. In this situation, it is serious. Now, we're going to continue to. We're trying to do two things. We'll continue to track the storm and see, does it increase, does it decrease, et cetera. And B, immediately try to alleviate those situations that could be exacerbated. Debris, homes that are dangerously fragile, either prop them up or take them down, frankly, in the interim.
Doing that,
The counties, FEMA's working on that, and we're working on that also.
to get it done before Wednesday?
Yes, yes. And if we have to evacuate, we begin it early and people take it seriously. People take it seriously. I can't tell you how many people said to me, you know, it was just a weather forecast and we didn't believe it because, you know, the Weather Service never gets anything right. And they said in Hurricane Irene we had to evacuate and it was nothing. And I made this point once before, and pardon me if you heard it before. First, to say they told us to evacuate in Hurricane Irene and they were wrong is not correct. Hurricane Irene was a deadly hurricane. They were wrong in where it hit, specifically. It hit more in upstate New York, but it was a deadly hurricane. They were not wrong when they said Hurricane Irene was deadly. Hurricane Irene was deadly. They were off within the state of where it was deadly, but it was deadly to New York State. Many of their neighbors are still, a year later. I can't tell you how many communities I've been working with for a year to recoup from Hurricane Irene. So they were wrong. They weren't wrong on Hurricane Irene. They weren't wrong here. And it's not worth the risk. When the notice goes out to evacuate, evacuate. It's your life. It's your child's life. Evacuate. And that's what we learned here.
When might you evacuate? Would it be tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow night? If it
It
gets-
totally depends on the progress of the storm and what the storm is. And it may be, you know, normally the evacuation order is only about the storm. There's a nuance here. It's not just about the storm, it's about the community you are in. So if you are already in a community that has sustained great damage, that has debris, that has homes that are fragile, that has a storm system or a beachhead that has been destroyed, you know, they're going to be, in some ways, it's a variable determination here that we're going to be working with the county officials. The really damaged, I would argue, if I'm a county official, the really damaged communities have a lower threshold, if you will, to sustain damage from this storm and should have a lower threshold for evacuation. But that's something we're going to be watching. Sally?
Then we gotta go.
You mentioned that you were in the Rockaway.
He's in a rush. He has a date, Josh, 6 o'clock.
I won't make them late. When you said you were in the Rockaways, you must have seen these huge
Well, that's exactly right, Sally. And look, the point was the sand was supposed to be on the beach because the beach was the barrier. So in many places, you have the barrier is now gone. The barrier is removed. So they're starting at with a much lower threshold to incur the damage in the first place.
Is there anything these homeowners can do with all this sand?
You know, we have the Army Corps of Engineers are out. We have the National Guard all over the Rockaways, for example. The Marines literally are landing in the Rockaways to help. We're trying to shore up the beach, but realistically, you're talking about 2 days. Can you put a beach back in 2 days? Can you reestablish a barrier island in 2 days? No. No, you can't. Now, again, we don't know what the storm is actually going to wind up being or doing, so this whole conversation is a little premature, and people are a little bit on edge about storms, so I don't want to over-exaggerate a situation either now, but my point is we will keep an eye on it. We are making preparations for it, and a point I will make is take evacuation orders seriously, please, 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 please. Yes? No. It's a kind of soft order. It's like the way I order my staff. It's sort of if you want to do it, you do it, if you know.
Governor, you say you spoke to President Obama earlier today. Did he reassure you that federal funds will be coming into the state quickly?
The federal government has been great. Has been great. Yes, he has. His entire team has. Secretary Napolitano, who is the Homeland Security Secretary, has been great. FEMA has been great. They've been very aggressive with the type of aid they could offer New York. They've offered local governments advances against damages. So they have been extraordinarily helpful.
Governor, you earlier alluded about whether gas rationing or alternate days based on your license, whatever. How close are we to having a discussion in serious?
If it was serious, we'd be having the conversation. That's sort of the mode we're in. It's not. There are options to deal with the situation. We consider a variety of options daily. The option we have selected at this time is to try to increase the supply, and that's partially by this going to other states and asking for waiver of their restrictions. The president has said he's going to work with us to ease those restrictions so we can get additional supply in. We're also working on getting gas stations back up and running. About half the gas stations have no power, so we're trying to get them generators because they have gas in the tank. They just need the generation. So we're working on a number of options simultaneously. On the issue of hoarding, the question was, how could you slow the hoarding? The rationing of gallons or odd even are devices more than anything to manage the hoarding, just reducing the number of people who are going on the line.
Could you just quickly name the states where you're trying to get gas from? Massachusetts, Connecticut?
States I've spoken with personally, Governor DeVal Patrick, Massachusetts, Governor Malloy, Connecticut, Governor Markell, Delaware. They have all agreed. The way it works is every state registers the tankers in its state and taxes the tankers that transfer the fuel or transport fuel. So the New York tankers aren't registered in Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts tankers aren't registered in New York. So you're really reliant on your own state system. And our state system is not up to capacity. Massachusetts is, Connecticut is. Common sense would say send the truck to Massachusetts. Common sense runs into government bureaucracy. Welcome. And how do you make it actually work? And we've been successful on that level. What I asked the president this afternoon was, could he do what we're doing on a case-by-case basis? Could he do that basically on a wholesale level and the federal government say to the northeast states or the eastern states, there'll be an emergency period and your state restrictions will be waived for this emergency period, and you can transport gasoline among the states.
He's considering that?
Yes, he said he would work with us on it today.
And then no taxes will be paid, is that correct?
The no taxes to those states for the tanker. The states tax not just gasoline at the pump, they also tax the tanker, or they charge the tanker a fee. It's basically a tax. They charge each truck a fee, and that fee would be waived
To the tank?
to the tanker.
In terms of insurance companies, are you hearing anything about concerns that they have with the ability to cover the fees or whatever costs might be incurred by this storm that's been unprecedented?
Not a peep, but let me ask the superintendent. Have you heard anything, Ben?
No, I think they're well-capitalized companies. We regulate them to make sure they're well-capitalized, and I think they can handle this.
Okay. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you.